little Niner football. Brad, thanks for the time, man. How are you?
Larry, I'm glad we can take a deep breath on the 2024 season, take a look back, and also look ahead at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, it's actually kind of an exciting time of year because this is kind of where you find out the Niners have been evaluating their roster, their coaches. They've been talking to all kinds of different people, I'm sure, agent wise, and trying to figure out who they want to retain, who they don't want to retain. And we're starting to see the beginning of the plan. What did you think with the news yesterday that Brian Schneider was let go?
It felt inevitable when you look at the performance of the 49ers special teams, not only over this year, but through the last few years that Schneider had been here. They just seemed to be at the bottom of the league in all major metrics. And it just felt like with the way this season kind of compounded on top of itself, with all the issues to the special teams. I know there were injuries. You lose Mitch Wisnowski in the middle of the year. You go through multiple kickers. But when Jake Moody returns, just isn't the same. But it's not only that, right? It's the coverage units. It's all of those things ranked at the bottom of the league. And it just felt inevitable. And I think in a season where the San Francisco 49ers definitely struggled in multiple areas, it felt like that was the one consistent that has just, we talk about complimentary football all the time, and I know that's something you talk about all the time, Larry, and it just felt like that was an area where the 49ers really needed them to be able to keep their heads above water, and it just felt like when the 49ers needed to rely on that, it wasn't there. And so at the end of the day, I'm really not surprised that this decision was made.
Well, he took over for Richard Hightower, who was the special teams coach in Kyle's first 5 years here. And I was looking at where the Niners ranked in special teams each and every year. Here's how it breaks out. 11th in 2017 under Hightower, 14th in 18, 12th in 19, 23rd in 2020, 26th in 2021, and it cost him his gig. So the average was 17th overall in special teams. And so they hired Schneider hoping that he would be a whole lot better. And Schneider, the special teams under Schneider in 22 was ranked 15th. Last year, 25th. This year, 31st. Yeah. So, I mean, they needed it to be better, and they're worse. And if you look at where they actually rank in special teams ranking in that stat of NFL expected points on special teams, they weren't just the worst. They were the worst by a wide margin over the Atlanta Falcons. So missed field goals, fake punts, penalties, muffed punts. There were 18 special teams penalties on the 49ers. The other thing I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, Brad, maybe you do, I get the sense that some people were saying that maybe he's out because he picked Jake Moody. I know he led the draft workout, which led the Niners to drafting Moody, who obviously, struggled badly. He went 11 of 20 in the second half of the year. From week 10 on, he was terrible. And he was 38th in field goal percentage among kickers this year. Do you think that was it? You think Schneider, you think Moody was his guy, and because Moody, S the bed, that basically that was it for Schneider?
However, I do believe that Schneider was Moody's guy, and it was well documented and chronicled throughout that situation. I remember Schneider talking about, how impressed he was with Moody during the pre-draft kind of workout and the adversity that he's able to work through in that workout. And I just remember hearing him speak about that. And so we know that that was definitely his guy, but you already, I think, pointed to a lot more other things that were more detrimental, I think, to the 49ers' success. Obviously, making field goals matters, but I think it was also the coverage units, how they were as when it comes to, being disciplined. You talked about the penalties. Those things to me are a little bit more indicative. I think with Moody, he's going through his own personal struggles, his own personal execution and things of that nature, where of course that is going to be a part of it. I don't know if that's the end-all be-all, like, we can just point to this one singular thing, because I think when you look at the special teams in its totality, you can look at almost every single spot whether metrics or just using the eye test, where the 49ers struggled on special teams. And like you mentioned, it only got worse under his watch, and we understand what it is. It's a production-based business, and if you're not producing, then the team will look elsewhere, and I think that's really what it comes down to.
You had one of the big posts of the day with the Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner. Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner significant, and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner significant others both posted on social media, both with kind of indications that maybe Greenlaw's time with, at least in the Bay, has come to an end. One of them was pictures of a party, and they're saying our last block party. I have some friends who know Dre, and I guess he bought a house in Dallas a few months ago, and there's talk that maybe he'd like to play closer to Dallas, or maybe they're just moving. I bring this up because there was another report today saying that from Greenlaw's fiance, Michaela Gallagher, she left a comment on Fred Warner's wife's IG post, adding, "Praying so hard that we'll be back." So, I mean, I saw this and I was like, no, I mean, this is the guy you got to have. I mean, I realize he's been hurt and his body's starting to break down. I realize they've got, they're hugged up against the cap and they got to pay their quarterback. I realize there's going to have to be a lot of bloodletting to afford Brock Purdy's next contract. But come on, man. This guy's got to be on the team. If you're going to willingly say goodbye to Dre Greenlaw, I mean, I got to question the wisdom. I really do, of that. This guy is so much what you want everybody to be about. If you could clone this guy, you would clone him. To let him walk out the door, tell me, Brad, that's not going to happen.
Well, Larry, first of all, I know you were in the building at Levi Stadium when he returned against the Rams. That was one of the most electric experiences of seeing a player return. And we know they put Fred Warner at the back of the line when they call out the starters, and they gave that to Dre, and the whole stadium just goes crazy. And then in his first game back, you see Dre Greenlaw and the heart of the defense that we have maybe even taken for granted in some moments. Like, we know Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football, but when you talk about the heart and soul and the energy and the tenacity and the violence of playing the linebacker position, that's what Dre brings to the table. He brings that speed, he brings that energy, and it was on full display in his first game back. Unfortunately, wasn't able to remain on the field, and then that kind of ended his year pretty quickly on the return back. Doesn't sound like anything too serious, but we know what it is, Larry. It's business time. It's time to put your business caps on. We know it's about dollars and cents at the end of the day. So my assumption is that maybe that's where this situation is at. Allow Dre to hit the open market, see what the market is saying. Maybe that opens up the door for an opportunity to be able to be like, all right, this is what the market is dictating to us. 49ers say, we feel comfortable being able to retain you at X amount. Maybe that's what gets it done. But, of course, with the post today, I mean, really sparked off the offseason with, the note about Dre's, best or Sydney's best friend being taken away to another team in NFL free agency. And you're like, that obviously set things quite ablaze today because everyone, I think, Larry, is of the same mindset as you. They want to see Dre back because we have missed Dre and that impact on the defense. And, man, when you see him out on that field, it's hard to look forward at building a roster in 2025 and being like, man, how do we not have Dre Greenlaw out there? You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, you got to have him. I mean, come on. I realize it's a cap sport. Screw your cap. Get this guy signed. I mean, seriously. John Lynch, I love you, brother. Screw your cap. Get this guy signed. Get this guy signed. This guy means so much. And the fact that, like literally 3 weeks ago, Nick Sorensen is telling me, at a press conference that Devondre Campbell's a hell of a guy and a great defensive leader and this and that, I got to question the wisdom of some of these evaluations down there. I question everything. Speaking of Sorensen, What is your feeling? Should he be back? Should he be out? The vast majority of fans want him out. I just think that the way this defense was so bad situationally that he should be out. I've heard other people suggest that, Cam Inman said maybe Jeff Ulbrich today. Mayoko said he says, I think I'd be surprised if they wanted him, that they didn't get him. Speaking of Ulbrich, if the Niners want Ulbrich as the defensive coordinator, he is a former Niner. So, Dr. John and Denise know him as well. There's maybe a relationship there. What do you think? Is Sorensen out altogether? Does he stay? Does he get fired but hired as the replacement for Schneider? He was Jacksonville's special teams coach. I could picture that. What do you see? What do you envision?
Well, I did see, Larry, right before we hopped on, Matt Barrows of The Athletic reported that John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, they will have their press conference with the media tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. So
Yep.
Just like Barrows had indicated, that's likely a strong sign that we know what the outcome, or at least the decision has been made. I'm leaning to the point of, I imagine Sorensen is likely on the outside looking in. I don't mind the idea of relegating him to special teams, but as we know, sometimes that can be a little trickier said than done. But it does seem like the 49ers, based on how this year's went, and at one point during the season, especially around the time where Nick Sorensen gets the vote of confidence from Nick Bosa, you're kind of like, I could actually envision a world that exists where maybe Sorensen sticks around and if they finish on a high note. But unfortunately, the way the season ended and the way the team played and the defense performance in those final two games, I mean, I think it might have reopened that discussion of what do we do here moving forward? Do we want to retain Sorensen? And with some of the candidates that had become available, like you had mentioned, like Ulbrich makes a lot of sense to me. He fits what the 49ers do schematically, being able to execute and implement the wide nine and, being able to have the same philosophies that have existed through Saleh and DeMeco Ryans, and then he would be able to plop right in there as well. There's obviously other options, Gus Bradley, and names like that. But I would imagine, especially with kind of how this has played out, that maybe they have made that decision to move on. But we haven't heard anything yet, Larry. So you never say never in this league, right?
Oh, I know. And to me, I'll be front center tomorrow at 11:30 when those guys talk, and it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. Kyle Van Noy annoyed the hell out of me last year after Christmas when the Ravens beat the Niners. And he's like, we didn't just beat the Niners. We gave the league a blueprint on how to beat Brock Purdy and how to beat Kyle Shanahan. And I kind of scoffed at it then, but man, Brock Purdy going into that game, 2023, 45 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 18 wins, 4 losses. Brock Purdy since that Ravens Christmas game, 25 touchdowns, 17 picks, 9 wins, 11 losses. He was 18-4 going into that. He's 9-11 coming out of that. Now, he did beat the Lions in the NFC Championship game, coming from behind in the second half, playing amazing football to do it. He did outduel Jordan Love in the Green Bay game the week prior, and he played pretty well in the Super Bowl. But it's hard to get beyond that. 9-11 after the Ravens game, 18-4 going into the Ravens game. And I'll throw it to you, Brad. I mean, what do you make of that? And how much should the 49ers pay Brock Purdy this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, when you lay out those numbers, of course, being able to show the contrast between those 2 points, it's definitely alarming, right? When you see such glowing, not only play on the field, I know you and I, Larry, we watch the All-22. We like to break it down. We like to get nitty-gritty into the film and really understand what's going on. But I also understand that we look at these numbers and we assess them and we try to find the trends within them. And I think when you look at the trends, and you mentioned, even though the numbers weren't great, Brock was able to execute 2 come-behind wins and gotta-have-it playoff moments that were huge. And he made huge plays in those games. He didn't melt in the Super Bowl. maybe didn't play to an insane level, but he didn't melt either, and I think that's worth something. But at the end of the day, this year just wasn't his best stuff. And even though it wasn't, and I think we spoke after the Chiefs game, and that was just, I believe, his worst game of his career. I had never seen Brock look like that before, just missing throw, missing reads, not seeing free rushers. It just was uncharacteristic.
Spags sped him up. Spags totally sped him up. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you could tell that the defense had the 49ers number that day. And there was a couple times this season where defensive coordinators felt like they were in Kyle Shanahan's playbook. So it is easy to say Brock didn't have a good year, but I also think while we say that, there were some amazing moments from Brock. Brock week 4 against the Patriots. He was absolutely cooking in that game. Even you fast forward a little bit to week 6 against the Seahawks when he goes on the road, cooking in that game. Now, I think that was one of the best games I might have ever seen Brock put together. I mean, remember that one throw he had to the front corner pylon to George Kittle where he threads it into a keyhole just outside of reach, opposite side hash? I mean, he has done some really nice things. We saw kind of a little bit of an evolution of his legs. So there's a lot of things that go into why the 49ers record is what it is and why those stats may bear it out. And Brock absolutely is responsible for a good portion of that. But I also do believe that Brock has earned the right to be able to, not only looking back at what he's done, but I do think that he's still continued to try to hang in there and deal. You saw what he did week 14 against the Bears, and then even against the Lions when it didn't matter. And it was an inconsistent year, but that goes across the board. So when you circle it back to the conversation about Brock Purdy getting paid, and I know, Larry, you and I, we'll spend a lot of time talking about this until that ink is actually dry. But we can talk, I think my perception or perspective of this is we can talk ourselves until we're blue in the face about what we think Brock is worth based on this year and the numbers and all of that. But at the end of the day, Larry, the market is what dictates the price. And the market is what is going to ultimately be the measuring stick for what Brock gets. And he's going to be compared against the Tuas, the Trevors of the world, the Jalen Hurts, all quarterbacks that he has beaten and outperformed even in stretches. So when it comes to paying Brock, again, we can talk about what is he worth until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, I do believe he has earned the right to be in that top 10 category. And it's going to be up to the 49ers and Brock's representation to just figure out exactly where that slots. My one thing with that is as long as the 49ers can stay competitive, they can structure the deal and spread it out over multiple years. And we know Parag has the ability to be able to do that and has done that consistently. And I think if they can figure that out and you can still build around Brock, it's a win-win for both sides.
Two last things. Today, the Niners signed 4 players to reserve future contracts, and these are not necessarily great players. Isaac Alarcon, Russell Gage, Jalen McKenzie, an offensive tackle. But the 4th name on the list is interesting to me, and that's Isaiah Hodgins, who was originally drafted by the Bills in the 6th round out of Oregon State. I think he started at Cal and then went to Oregon State. And this is the son of the longtime NFL fullback James Hodgins, who was part of that Greatest Show on Turf Rams team in the late 90s. And this kid is I guess he's a native of Oakley. And I've always liked his game. I mean, he's not he's a big receiver. He's 6'3", 6'4". He's a 4'6" receiver. I guess my question is this, Brad. You watch a lot of the All-22. I mean, this guy is 4'6" with great height. He started 2 playoff games. I think with Brock Purdy, this could be a real nice player for the 49ers. He doesn't really separate a ton. Do you think can a 4'6", 6'4" guy, make it in the NFL, or do cornerbacks just squat on all the underneath stuff and because you can't run by them? I mean, can a guy like Hodgins without a blistering 40 time come to San Francisco and make a name for himself? I kind of like the upside potential. I love the ball skills and the size of Hodgins. He's a true, kind of reminds me of like a Mike Wilson for old time Niner fans. Just a big physical receiver that can work the sidelines pretty effectively.
Well, Larry, we just had a big-bodied, maybe not considered an elite separator or even necessarily even a above-average separator, come about, what was it, like 25 yards away from breaking 1,000 yards on the season, but he got ejected.
There's a little Jawan. That's a good call. There is a little Jawan Jennings
from the game because he was blocking too hard. Well, when I watch Isaiah Hodgins, and like you mentioned, I was also on him as well coming into the draft, and he was a guy that I thought had a great skill set. Again, not an elite separator, but again, with these guys, you want them to learn, or you want to be able to see them win their way, right? They're not going to win with blistering speed, maybe the craziest routes like that you would see from Brandon Ayuk. You just want to see them win their way. And if they can win with leverage and they can understand timing, anticipation, and when you have a quarterback like Brock who can throw with anticipation and has seemingly found quite the rapport with a like wide receiver in Jawan Jennings, I'm excited about this. I really am. When I saw it, I was like, oh, heck yeah, let's roll. Like, I don't know what that means for the season. Will he make the final 53? Will he even see the field as a member of the 49ers? That remains to be seen. But you and I, Larry, we both like to look at the upside of players, and this is a player with a ton of upside. I mean, in his second year in the NFL, he played on 2 teams and had 500 receiving yards. I believe it was around 4 to 5 touchdowns receiving. I think the skill set is there. I think there is ability, and I think that's what you're looking at for the upside. And so when you look at Hodgins, you compare him to and maybe Jawan in a sense. Of course, Jawan is Jawan. He's a unique player, but I see some similarities. And if he can just be effective in any stretch, if he can make the 53, that's great. And we'll see from there. But what I'm really excited about is to see this kid in OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and if he makes it to training camp, hey, who knows? He could be a little diamond that the 49ers just picked up.
I really like him. To me, this is a nice pickup. He's not a burner by any stretch, but this guy he's got good ball skills and he's big, and you got a quarterback like Brock who's got good accuracy. This could be a red zone threat. Last one. You mentioned that tomorrow at 11:30 down in Santa Clara, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan will address the media. All right, Brad, I'll put you on the spot. We're going to open up the phone lines in the next segment, and I'm going to let the callers have their say. If they have one question for Lynch, one question for Shanahan, I'd like to know what it is. So I'll throw it to you first on our way out here. If you were attending, I know you'll be watching that presser tomorrow, but if you could actually get in and ask some questions, is there one question you'd like to ask Kyle or one question you'd like to ask John?
You know me, Larry. I'm a big offensive line guy. And when you put me on the spot, I think my mind immediately goes there. When I look at some of the biggest struggles that the 49ers had this year, I look at the interior. Now, I do think that Purdy played really well this year, but it was actually hilarious. You know how Deebo Samuel has his podcast on Bleacher Report? He said that Deebo told him that he hit his rookie wall 7 weeks ago. And I thought that was funny because you could kind of see the gas kind of coming out of the tire a little bit, or the air coming out of the tire a little bit with Purdy, but still he's played well. And you see what he can provide and his growth, what that will look like. But when you look at the center position, when you look at the left guard position, that's really where I want to see the 49ers try to get better at those spots. And I don't know the exact question I would ask Larry off the top of my head, but it would most likely be about that spot, maybe their plans, or their own assessment is of that, and what do they think moving forward? Are they good with what it is? Aaron Banks is set to hit the open market. I'm of the assumption that he won't return. So there's a potential spot to fill at left guard. Do they look at center in free agency like Dahlman? I'm just fascinated with how maybe a retooling on the interior O-line occurs. Do they kick McKivitz down to left guard and draft a tackle Will Campbell? What do they do, Larry? That's kind of like, I would have to think about it and craft it a little bit more professionally, but that's kind of where my mind goes to right away.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question, the obvious one is, where is offensive line on the priority list? I know you guys have talked, because this year they talked openly about how, you can get offensive linemen later, and they believe in getting skill position guys early. If they believe in that, and knowing that you're not going to have, you may not have Debo, you're not going to have Ayuk for a good portion of the year. So what do you got at receiver? You got JJ and Cowing and Pearsall. Do you have to think receiver again, even though, receiver is not, you would think, was down the list of priorities, but is it? If you're going to wind up trading or cutting Debo and you don't have Ayuk, you're going to need another receiver.
Absolutely consider a wide receiver at 11.
I mean, that's one, and then the other one is, the way the Niners are. It's like all roads lead back. They can break it. They can break it down a million ways. Look at tons of different